So, apparently, we are watching Donald Trump do the thing he always does, which is he hires someone, he praises them, he puts them on TV like a new appliance he just bought. And then, right when you start thinking, okay, I guess this is the guy now, Trump immediately starts acting like he's never met them in his life. It's like a political version of when you see a dad at the mall pretending not to recognize his own kid because the kid asked for a pretzel. That's what's happening right now with J.D. Vance. And the headline is basically, Trump is abandoning J.D. Vance, and Republican chaos is exploding. Which, to be fair, is also the headline every day, but this time it's his own vice president. The guy who is literally supposed to be attached to him like a backpack. And Trump is already doing that thing, where he's slowly unzipping the straps. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, Trump is at war with his own vice president? Yeah. Not with Democrats, not with the media, not with the Justice Department, not with NATO, not with the ghost of Barack Obama. This time it's J.D. Vance. Which is funny, because J.D. Vance has been auditioning for the role of Trump's favorite little helper for years. He's been doing the whole routine. The compliments, the loyalty, the sudden personality transformation, where he goes from, I'm an intellectual conservative, to, I'm a guy who thinks the Constitution is whatever Trump says it is. And now Trump is like, I'm bored. Next. Because that's the truth about Trump. Everyone around him thinks they're the exception. They think, oh, he throws everyone else under the bus, but not me. And then one day, Trump looks at them like they're a piece of gum stuck to his shoe and goes, who is this person? Why are they here? Get them away from me. It happened to Jeff Sessions. It happened to Bill Barr. It happened to Mike Pence, who by the end looked like a man who aged 50 years in 4 years, like he'd been locked in a haunted house with a clown. And now it's happening to J.D. Vance, who somehow manages to look both smug and terrified at the same time, which is not easy. That's a hard face to pull off. It's like, I'm smarter than you, mixed with, please don't hit me. And the reason this matters is not because I feel bad for J.D. Vance. I don't. I don't think anyone does. If you asked a room full of Republicans, who here would take a bullet for J.D. Vance? They'd be like, can it be a small bullet, like a Nerf bullet, and can it miss? Nobody is emotionally invested in this guy. But it matters because it tells you exactly what kind of mess the Republican Party has become under Trump. It's not even a party anymore. It's a reality show. It's like if The Bachelor was run by a guy who hates roses and only hands out subpoenas. What we're watching right now is not a normal political disagreement. It's not like, oh, the vice president thinks we should do infrastructure, and the president thinks we should do tax cuts. No. This is Trump doing what he does best, creating chaos, escalating drama, and then acting like the chaos is everyone else's fault. And this time, the trigger is war, specifically Iran. Because of course it is. It's always something huge and dangerous and totally unnecessary. Trump can't just have a quiet week where he argues about a bill or negotiates a budget. No, he has to wake up and be like, you know what would really spice things up? International conflict. And it all started with Trump doing this thing he does, where he says something that sounds like policy, but it's really just him improvising out loud like a guy at a dinner party trying to sound important. He stands in front of cameras and says, Iran called him to negotiate. Iran called. They want to negotiate. A meeting is being set up, but we may have to act before the meeting. Act. Act how? Like act in a movie? Is he doing community theater now? What does that mean? When Trump says act, it could mean anything. It could mean sanctions. It could mean airstrikes. It could mean he's going to tweet in all caps. It could mean he's going to send Eric Trump over there with a coupon for Trump steaks. And that's the problem. This isn't strategy. It isn't diplomacy. It's confusion dressed up as authority. It's like watching a toddler in a suit try to give a press conference. We're going to do the thing. The thing is happening. And if the thing doesn't happen, we're going to do a different thing. And everyone around him is standing there going, okay, do we clap? Do we call the Pentagon? Do we hide the nuclear codes? It's panic. Because you cannot threaten military action while also saying, Oh, by the way, they called to negotiate. That's not how any of this works. That's like saying, my wife called and said she wants to talk things out, but I might burn the house down before she gets home. That's not a plan. That's a mental health crisis. And the most insane part is how casual he is about it, like he's ordering off a menu. We may have to act before the meeting, like we may have to get appetizers before the entrees. No, you may have to start a war. You may have to send people into combat. You may have to set the Middle East on fire. But sure, say it like you're picking a wine. And you know who hears that and immediately starts sweating? J.D. Vance. Because J.D. Vance built his whole political identity on one central promise: no new wars. That's his brand. That's his thing. That's the entire pitch to the Republican base that is exhausted by the Iraq War, Afghanistan, all of it. Vance wants to be the guy who says, we're done with endless foreign entanglements. America first. Restraint. He's the guy who wants to be seen as the anti-interventionist, the skeptic of military adventures, the guy who will push back against the old neocon playbook. And now he's standing next to Donald Trump, who is basically like a Roomba that only bumps into wars. Trump just wanders around, hits a wall, and suddenly it's, we're bombing someone. And J.D. Vance is like, wait. This is not what I signed up for. I signed up for culture wars and book bans and yelling at college students, not actual wars. Because Vance understands something very simple. War with Iran would be a disaster. Economically, politically, globally. Oil prices spike, markets freak out, allies panic, voters get nervous. And the Republican Party, which already looks like it's being held together with duct tape and prayer, starts falling apart. And for J.D. Vance, personally, it's even worse, because he's got 2028 in his head. He's already thinking about the next step. He wants to be president. He wants to be the heir. And you cannot run as the anti-war Republican while you're vice president during a major military escalation. That's like trying to run as the healthy lifestyle candidate while you're literally eating a cheeseburger in every campaign photo. People will remember. They will not let you forget. So what does J.D. Vance do? He doesn't go on TV and openly defy Trump, because that would be suicide in Trump world. You don't challenge Trump directly. That's like poking a bear, except the bear has a social media account and a cult following. You challenge Trump, and suddenly you're a loser, a traitor, low energy, and your political career is over. So, Vance does the thing Washington people do when they want to pretend they're brave without actually being brave. He leaks. Suddenly, anonymous officials are talking to the press. Suddenly, stories come out framing Vance as the voice urging diplomacy. Trump is leaning toward strikes. Vance wants talks. And that doesn't happen by accident. That is not some reporter stumbling onto a scoop. That is placement. That is someone putting a narrative out there on purpose. It's like when you break up with someone, but you don't want to look like the bad guy. So you start telling mutual friends, I tried, but they're just, unstable. That's what Vance is doing. He's building a paper trail. He's creating daylight. He wants to be able to say later, hey, don't blame me. I was the adult in the room. And Trump hates that. Trump hates positioning. Trump hates anyone planning for life after him, because in Trump's mind, loyalty means you go down with the ship, smiling, waving, saying, thank you, sir, as the water rises. You do not get to grab a lifeboat. You do not get to say, actually, I warned him. Trump wants obedience, total obedience. And the moment he senses someone is thinking about their own future, he treats them like a threat. That's why this feels like abandonment. Because it is. Not officially, not yet, but strategically. Trump is starting to isolate J.D. Vance. And in Trump world, silence is a warning. Trump's pattern is always the same. First, he ignores you, then he undermines you, then he blames you. J.D. Vance is somewhere between step 1 and step 2. He's in the you're not invited to lunch anymore phase. The I'm not mentioning you in speeches phase. The you're standing behind me in the photo, but I'm acting like you're a lamp phase. And look, I know what some people will say. This is normal. Vice presidents and presidents disagree all the time. No, this is not normal. This is Trump. Trump doesn't do normal. Normal would be a private conversation. Normal would be policy meetings. Normal would be a president saying, we have different views, but we're working it out. Trump's version of working it out is humiliating you publicly, leaking against you, and then firing you in a tweet at 3 a.m. like he's still hosting The Apprentice. And it's not just about Vance. It's about the Republican Party's internal decay. Because when your vice president is leaking to protect himself from your president, that's not governance. That's self-preservation. That's everyone in the building quietly packing their boxes while pretending everything is fine. That's the vibe of a company right before layoffs. Oh yeah, we're doing great. Big plans, exciting future. Meanwhile, everyone is updating their LinkedIn, and Republicans are already in a fragile position. Their House majority is shrinking. The Senate is unstable. Midterms are coming. Donors are nervous. Markets are volatile. And instead of unifying the party, Trump is picking fights with everyone who isn't 100% submissive, including the guy who is literally supposed to be his number two. That is not strength. That is fragmentation. That is a party eating itself. And the Iran thing is just the spark. The bigger issue is Trump's erratic decision-making. Because Trump is doing what he always does. He listens to the loudest voices in the room. Not the smartest. Not the most informed. The loudest. The people who go on TV and say, we have to show strength. The Lindsey Grahams of the world. The permanent war crowd. The people who think American power is measured by how many bombs we drop. Those are the voices Trump still trusts, because they flatter him. They tell him he's strong. They tell him he's decisive. They tell him he's Churchill, when really he's more like a guy yelling at the TV because the remote isn't working. J.D. Vance's quiet caution doesn't stand a chance against that. Because caution doesn't feed Trump's ego. Restraint doesn't get applause at a rally. Diplomacy doesn't make him feel like a tough guy. War talk does. War talk makes him feel powerful. And that's what this is. It's not foreign policy. It's impulse control. Trump talks tough when he thinks it plays well politically. He goes vague when he doesn't understand the consequences. And he contradicts himself when he doesn't care who has to clean it up afterward. And you know what's really telling? Trump has never spoken this way about Vladimir Putin. Never. He never threatens Putin publicly. He never warns him. He never claims leverage. With Putin, it's always, we have a great relationship. He's very smart. He's a strong leader. With Iran, it's, they called me. We might have to act. Why? Because Trump is terrified of Putin, or he admires him, or both. But either way, he doesn't posture like this with Putin. He postures with people he thinks he can bully. And that contradiction exposes what this really is, performance. It's always performance. And that's what J.D. Vance is realizing in real time. He thought he was signing up for a movement. He thought he was joining the future of the party. He thought he could ride Trump's base and then eventually inherit it. But Trump doesn't do inheritance. Trump doesn't build successors. Trump builds scapegoats. He doesn't want a future. He wants control, and anyone who starts acting like an independent political actor becomes a problem. So now you have this weird dynamic where J.D. Vance is operating like a future presidential candidate who happens to be trapped in Trump's administration. And Trump is operating like a guy who doesn't care what happens in 3 years because he only cares about today's headline. Those two instincts cannot coexist. Vance wants survival. Trump wants dominance. Vance wants to look responsible. Trump wants to look strong. Vance wants to keep his brand intact. Trump wants everyone to burn with him. And the Republican Party is watching this and doing math. Because that's what politicians do. They don't have principles, they have calculators. They're looking at the midterms and thinking, if Trump escalates toward war and the economy stumbles, we lose. If they lose, Trump becomes a lame duck. If Trump becomes a lame duck, his grip on the party evaporates. And then suddenly, all these people who have been kissing his ring for years start pretending they never liked him. Oh, I always had concerns. I always thought his tone was divisive. I always believed in norms. Yeah, sure. And I always believed in kale. So you're seeing the early stages of hedging, quiet distancing, leaks, statements that sound supportive but have just enough wiggle room, votes that don't quite go his way, procedural resistance. It's subtle, but it's happening. And once it starts, it accelerates. Because fear is contagious. And right now, Republicans are starting to fear Trump not as a weapon against Democrats, but as a liability to themselves. That's the shift. For years, Trump's dominance was built on fear and inevitability. Lawmakers believed opposing him meant political death. They believed the base would never turn. They believed Trump's grip was permanent. But that belief is eroding, not because Trump suddenly became weaker, but because his behavior has become more costly. He's not just a chaos machine anymore. He's a chaos machine that might drag them all down with him. And the Iran situation makes that cost very real. Because if Trump escalates, the consequences hit fast. Oil prices, gas prices, market volatility, global uncertainty. Voters feel it immediately. There is no spin that fixes higher gas prices. You can't rally your way out of that. You can't tweet your way out of that. You can scream, "America first," until you're blue in the face. People still notice when it costs them more to fill up their car. And Republicans know this. That's why J.D. Vance is scrambling to keep his fingerprints off the decision. That's why others are quietly doing the same. Because once the consequences land, Trump will look for someone to blame. And he always blames someone. That's his superpower. Nothing is ever his fault. If it goes well, it's because he's a genius. If it goes badly, it's because someone else sabotaged him. The deep state, the media, the generals, the judges, the weather, and vice presidents make excellent scapegoats. They're close enough to blame, but not powerful enough to fight back. That's why Vance is nervous. He watched what happened to Pence. He watched Trump turn on Pence like a guy turning on his own shadow. One day, Pence was loyal. The next day, he was disloyal. And then suddenly, Trump supporters were chanting about hanging him. That's not politics. That's a cult. And J.D. Vance is standing there like, "Oh, wow, this is really happening." And you know what the funniest part is? J.D. Vance did all of this to himself because he didn't have to be here. He didn't have to attach himself to Trump. He chose this. He chose to be the guy who said, "Actually, Trump is great." He chose to do the whole conversion story. I used to criticize him, but now I see the light. Yeah, you saw the light all right. It was the glow of political ambition. That's what it was. And now he's learning that Trump doesn't reward ambition unless it's aimed at serving him. So, what happens next? Well, if history is any guide, Trump will continue to isolate Vance. He'll stop mentioning him. He'll stop praising him. He'll let allies whisper that Vance is weak, that he's not loyal, that he's not tough enough, that he's too cautious. And then eventually, when it's useful, Trump will publicly humiliate him. Maybe at a rally, maybe in an interview, maybe in some offhand comment where he says, "You know, JD, nice guy, but that but is always the kiss of death." Nice guy, but it's like when someone says, "No offense, but you know something awful is coming." And Vance will have to decide what to do. Does he keep leaking and trying to build distance? Does he try to crawl back and prove loyalty? Does he try to play both sides? Because that's the thing, he wants to be Trump's vice president and also the future of the party. But you can't be both when Trump is still in charge. Trump doesn't do future. Trump does me. And anyone who starts thinking beyond me becomes the enemy. And meanwhile, the Republican Party keeps fracturing. Because this is not a party with a coherent ideology anymore. It's a party of factions. You've got the true believers who will follow Trump into any disaster as long as he insults the right people. You've got the opportunists who are trying to survive and keep their seats. You've got the donors who are watching the markets and quietly panicking. You've got the hawks who want war. You've got the isolationists who don't. You've got the culture warriors who only care about fighting imaginary enemies. And you've got the people like J.D. Vance who are trying to pretend they have principles while also desperately wanting power. That is not unity. That is a blender full of knives. And this is where it gets even more dangerous. Because once a party's leaders begin acting primarily to protect themselves from their own president, governance becomes impossible. You cannot run a country like that. You cannot manage crises like that. You cannot negotiate with allies like that. Because everyone is thinking about their own exit strategy. Everyone is thinking about their own brand. Everyone is thinking, how do I not get blamed when this blows up? That's not leadership. That's damage control. And this is why leaks matter. Leaks are how power shifts quietly in Washington. Leaks are how people create narratives before the official story is written. And J.D. Vance understands that. He understands you don't beat Trump head on. You survive him by shaping the narrative around him, especially when he's self-destructing. That's what this is. It's insulation. It's not courage. It's not some noble stand for peace. It's self-preservation. He's trying to make sure that when things go wrong, he can say, I warned him. But Trump doesn't tolerate that. Trump doesn't tolerate anyone preparing a parachute while he's still flying the plane. In Trump's mind, if you're not cheering, you're betraying. If you're not clapping, you're plotting. And honestly, he's not wrong. They are plotting. They're all plotting because they know Trump will not protect them. He will blame them. He will discard them. He will throw them into the fire to save himself. And that's the core truth here. Trump doesn't need J.D. Vance anymore. That's what's driving this. Trump already has the base. He already has the spotlight. He already has the loudest voices amplifying him. J.D. Vance was supposed to be the bridge to the future, the next generation, the intellectual justification, the rebranding. But Trump isn't interested in the future. He's interested in control. And anyone who starts acting like a successor becomes a threat. So when you hear Trump is abandoning J.D. Vance, don't picture some dramatic breakup speech. Picture something colder. Picture Trump just slowly turning away, ignoring him, sidelining him, letting him twist, letting him sweat, letting him get blamed. That's how Trump abandons people. Not with a big announcement, with neglect, with silence, with little humiliations, with the message, you're not special, you're replaceable. And Republicans are watching this with a mix of fear and calculation. Because if Trump is willing to discard his own vice president for pushing diplomacy, what does that say about everyone else? It says loyalty is temporary. It says restraint is punishable. It says survival requires separation. And that's why more Republicans are quietly preparing for a post-Trump world, even while pretending they're still loyal. They won't say it publicly yet. They won't challenge him directly, but they're laying groundwork. And once that starts, it accelerates. Because the moment people stop believing you're good for their future, they stop protecting you. That's the most dangerous thing for Trump. Not Democrats, not the media, not even prosecutors. The most dangerous thing for Trump is the moment Republicans decide he's no longer inevitable. Because Trump's power is not policy, it's fear. It's the belief that he controls the base, and the base controls their careers. But if that belief cracks, the whole thing starts to collapse. And we're seeing cracks. J.D. Vance is one crack. The Fed fight is another. The donor anxiety is another. The constant internal chaos is another. This is what collapse looks like in slow motion. Not one big dramatic moment, but 1,000 little acts of self-preservation that add up to defiance. And the irony is, Trump created this environment himself. He forced everyone around him to start thinking about exits by attacking institutions, threatening allies, escalating every conflict, refusing to listen. He turned loyalty into a trap. And now, instead of commanding loyalty, he's provoking fear. And fear, when it turns inward, destroys parties faster than any opposition ever could. So yeah, Republican chaos explodes. That's accurate. But it's not exploding because Democrats did something brilliant. It's exploding because Trump can't stop lighting fires. And now, the people closest to him are starting to realize they might burn too. J.D. Vance is not trying to save Trump from himself. He's trying to save himself from Trump. And that tells you exactly where this is headed. Trump may still hold rallies. He may still dominate headlines. He may still command a loud base. But inside the machinery of power, Congress, the cabinet, the donor class, the party infrastructure, something has shifted. Trump is no longer seen as inevitable. He's seen as volatile. And volatility is something politicians hedge against, not commit to. So keep an eye on how this plays out. Watch for the silence. Watch for the leaks. Watch for the subtle distancing. Watch for the moment Trump decides J.D. Vance is more useful as a punching bag than a partner. Because once Trump turns on you, it's not a disagreement. It's a demolition. And J.D. Vance is standing right in the blast zone. And honestly, if you're J.D. Vance, what do you even do? You can't quit. You can't openly rebel. You can't out-Trump Trump. You can only do what everyone does around him. Try to survive. Try to stay close enough to benefit, but far enough to not get crushed. It's like trying to stand next to a fireworks display while also pretending you're not standing next to a fireworks display. So if you want a preview of the Republican Party's future, this is it. A party where the vice president is leaking to protect himself from the president. A party where America First turns into everyone for themselves. A party where the loudest voices win, even when they're wrong. A party where the only consistent principle is loyalty to one man, and even that loyalty has an expiration date. And the craziest part is, we're not even at the peak yet. This is just the beginning. Because the closer we get to the midterms, the more pressure mounts, the more consequences land, the more Republicans will start asking the question they're already whispering. Not, how do we help Trump win, but how do we survive Trump losing?